The conference music hall stretched. Wider than most planetary stadiums, its ceiling curved like the inside of a shell lined with bioluminescent panels that pulsed in rhythm with the translators humming through the air. Delegates from 47 species filled the tiered seats, their forms as varied as the stars themselves. Some floated in containment spheres, others perched on crystalline platforms, a few required atmosphere suits that hissed softly with each breath. Ambassador Chin Mei stood at the human podium, her hands resting on the cold metal surface. She could feel the weight of 10,000 eyes on her, though most of those eyes saw light in spectrum she could never perceive. Air smelled of ozone and something sweet she couldn't name. Her heart beat steady in her chest, trained by years of diplomacy to stay calm when everything inside wanted to run. The vote had just finished. The holographic display above the chamber showed the results and symbols that burned themselves into her memory. 46 species in favor, 1 against. Humanity stood alone. The motion passes, announced arbitrator Cole, his voice like grinding stone translated through her earpiece. The towering figure was composed of living rock, his surface etched with glowing veins of molten copper. Earth and its colonies will be placed under economic quarantine, effective immediately. All trade suspended, all treaties dissolved, all human vessels will be barred from Galactic Council space. Chin Mei's fingers tightened on the podium. Around the chamber, delegates began to rise. Some moved toward the exits with fluid grace. Others simply vanished, teleported away by technologies humanity had only begun to understand. None looked back. "Please," she said, her voice carrying through the translator network, "please. Just listen for one more minute." A few paused, most continued walking. "We made a mistake," Chin Mei continued the words, tasting like ash. "One colony, one governor who exceeded his authority. We've already removed him from power. We've already begun reparations to the Verdani refugees. This doesn't represent humanity as a whole." Senator Thrace of the Corvani Empire turned at the doorway, his triple-jointed legs clicking against the floor. His face, covered in iridescent scales, showed no expression humans could read. "One mistake is all it takes, Ambassador. Your species killed 17,000 Verdani. Civilians in a resource dispute, 17,000. Minds erased, families destroyed, and your defense is that it was unauthorized." His translator couldn't hide the disgust. "That makes it worse. It means you cannot control your own people." "We're young," Chin Mei said, and hated how desperate she sounded. "We're still learning. Every species here has made mistakes, the Corvani themselves." Once, Thrace interrupted, "is the key word. We learned, we grew, we joined the community of civilized beings, but you," he gestured to the empty chamber, "you bring war everywhere you go, even to yourselves. Your own planet is still scarred from your conflicts. We welcomed you to the galaxy, and you repaid us with blood. You left the door sealed behind him with a sound like thunder." Chin Mei stood alone in the vast chamber. The lights continued their slow pulse. Indifferent to her presence, she could hear her own breathing loud in the silence. Her hands were shaking now. She pressed them flat against the podium until they stopped somewhere on Earth. Her daughter was probably asleep, 7 years old, dreaming of the stars her mother had promised to show her. Chin Mei had told her stories about the galaxy, about the friends humanity was making. Out there in the dark, about the future. They were building together, she had believed those stories herself. The communicator on her wrist vibrated. Message from Geneva, from the secretary. General, she didn't need to read it to know what it said. Come home. There's nothing more you can do. But Chenmi stayed standing at the podium, looking out at the empty seats. Somewhere in the galaxy, trade routes were already being rerouted around human space, cargo ships returning away from Earth's orbital stations. Supply lines that fed the outer colonies were being severed like threats. Medicines that humanity couldn't manufacture yet, technologies they had barely begun to understand. Food shipments for the newer settlements that still couldn't sustain themselves. All of it gone. She thought of the colony on Proxima B, barely 5,000 souls scratching life from red soil. She thought of the research station at TD, dependent on alien equipment they couldn't repair themselves. She thought of Earth, overcrowded and hungry, that had looked to the stars for hope. The lights pulsed. 1, 2, 3. Chen Mei straightened her jacket, picked up her tablet and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the emptiness. The door opened before her, revealing the long corridor that led back to the human delegation ship, her ship now the last human vessel still in council space. Behind her, the chamber lights began to dim. The galaxy was moving on already, forgetting the small species that had reached too far too fast. But Chinmi kept walking because that's what humans did. They kept walking even when the path ahead went dark. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. Chinmi spent most of it in her quarters, watching the stars streak past through the viewport. They looked the same as always, cold and distant and beautiful. It was strange how something could stay unchanged while everything else fell apart. Captain Rodriguez brought her meals twice a day. He never asked questions, just set the tray down on her desk and left with a quiet nod. On the 10th day she finally ate something. The food tasted like nothing, but her body needed fuel. Diplomats didn't have the luxury of falling apart completely. When they crossed into the solar system, Chen Mei forced herself to the bridge. The crew moved around her with practiced efficiency, their faces carefully neutral. They knew what had happened. Everyone knew. The news had traveled faster than their ship carried on. Quantum communication networks that humanity had borrowed but never truly owned. Earth hung in the viewport ahead, blue and white and achingly familiar. From this distance you couldn't see the sprawling megacities, the refugee camps, the border walls that divided nation from nation. You couldn't see the scars. It just looked like home. Ambassador Rodriguez said quietly, standing beside her. Geneva is requesting immediate conference upon landing. The Security Council, all permanent members. Chinmi nodded. She had expected that. What she hadn't expected was the fear in Rodriguez's eyes when he glanced at her. Captain, she asked. He hesitated, then pulled up a data screen. These started coming in 2 days ago. We kept them from you while you were recovering. The reports scrolled past. Colony distress signals. TD research station going dark as life support systems failed without replacement parts. Proxima B reporting crop failures. They're alien designed. Hydroponics breaking down. Europa station requesting emergency evacuation as their aging fusion reactor showed critical failures. New Shanghai orbital platform losing air pressure. Their alien manufactured sealant depleted. 15. Colonies, 4 major stations, 38,000. People in immediate danger, Chinmez. Hands clenched at her sides. How long do they have? Estimates vary, some have months, others. Rodriguez's voice dropped. Ta said he has maybe 3 weeks before their oxygen recyclers fail completely. 3 weeks, the same amount of time it had taken her to travel home. The council wants to discuss evacuation protocols. Rodriguez continued, bringing everyone back to Earth or Mars, abandoning the outer colonies entirely. Chinmay turned from the viewport. No. Rodriguez blinked. Ambassador, no, she repeated stronger now. We don't abandon them, we don't give up. That's what they expect from us, isn't it? That we'll collapse, that will prove them right. About humanity being too weak, too divided, too broken to stand on our own. With respect, ma'am, we might not have choice without Galactic Council, technology without their trade, then we figure it out ourselves. Chin may move to the Communication Council, send a message to Geneva, tell them I'm calling an emergency session, not just the Security Council. Everyone, every nation, every territory, every corporate entity with resources. If humanity is alone now, then we need to act like it. Rodriguez looked uncertain, but he nodded. Yes, Ambassador. The landing came hours later. Geneva appeared through the clouds, the city lights spreading like a constellation across the Swiss landscape. The diplomatic complex rose from the shore of the lake, its glass towers reflecting the sunset. Chinmay had always found it beautiful. Today it just looked fragile. The conference room was already full when she arrived. Faces from every corner of Earth projected on screens or sitting in person around the vast circular table. The Secretary General, looking 10 years older than when Chinmay had left. Defense ministers, economic advisors, corporate representatives, scientists, even a few colony governors who had made it back before the borders closed. They all turned when she entered. The room fell silent. Chinmay took her seat. She didn't wait for the Secretary General to open the session. There wasn't time for protocol. 15 colonies are dying, she said, her voice cutting through the silence. 4 stations are failing. 38,000 people are running out of air, water, food, and time. The galaxy has decided we're not worth saving, but that doesn't mean we have to agree with them. Minister Aon Kwo from the African Union leaned forward. Ambassador Chin, we understand your feelings, but we need to be realistic. Without alien technology, we cannot sustain those settlements. The humane option is evacuation and consolidation. The humane option, Chinmay said slowly, is to save them, all of them. With what? Director Park from Luna demanded. Our ships are outdated. Our manufacturing is dependent on materials we can no longer acquire. Our most advanced research was based on alien principles we barely understand. We're being asked to run before we've learned to walk. Chinmay looked around the table. She saw fear there, anger, resignation, but also in a few faces something else. A spark of defiance. Dr. Amara from the Earth Science Coalition was leaning forward, her dark eyes intense. What exactly are you proposing, Ambassador? I'm proposing we stop waiting for someone to save us, Chinmay said. Verdani refugees who survived our colony's attack. They're still here, aren't they? Stranded on Earth when their own people wouldn't take them back. They know their technology. The Corvani traders who married humans and chose to stay, they have knowledge. The University programs, we started training. Human engineers in alien sciences, those. Students haven't forgotten everything. She stood placing her hands on the table. We have 3 weeks to save TD. So we take every engineer we have. Every scientist, every person who knows anything about alien systems, and we focus everything on building what they need, not asking for it, not buying it. Building it ourselves, that's impossible, someone muttered. Probably. Chinmi agreed, but we're human. Impossible is what we do best. The Secretary General was watching her carefully. And if we fail, Chinmi met his eyes, then we fail trying, and that's still better than giving up. First prototype exploded on the 4th day. Dr. Amara stood in the ruins of her laboratory, foam retardant dripping from the ceiling, and laughed. It was the kind of laugh that came from exhaustion and desperation, and something that might have been hope. Her team stared at her like she'd lost her mind. We got closer, she said, wiping soot from her face. The reaction held for almost 6 seconds before the containment failed. That's 4 seconds longer than yesterday. Chinmay watched from the observation window above. She hadn't slept in 3 days. None of them had. The Geneva complex had transformed into something between a research facility and a war room, with every available space converted into laboratories, fabrication centers, testing grounds. The lake outside reflected the lights that burned through every night. Hundreds of windows glowing like defiant stars across the city. Similar scenes played out in a dozen facilities. Old CERN campus had been reopened, its particle accelerators repurposed to test materials under conditions that mimicked alien manufacturing processes. In Shanghai, engineers worked to reverse engineer Corvani air recyclers from the broken fragments salvaged from early colony equipment. Mumbai's Balabs grew experimental crops designed to survive in Proxima B's harsh soil using nothing but human genetic engineering. The galaxy had cut them off, but humanity had scattered alien technology across its settlements for 20 years. Now, they were teaching themselves to understand it piece by piece, failure by failure. Chinma's communicator bust. She glanced down at the message from TD station. Oxygen levels at 41%. Life support degrading faster than projected. Time remaining 16 days. She closed her eyes. 16 days. The prototype wouldn't be ready in 16 days. It might not be ready in 16 months, but Dr. Amara was already back in the lab shouting instructions to her team, pulling up new calculations. They were rebuilding the containment chamber with modifications, changing the variables, trying again. Across the room, a young engineer named Hassan was explaining something to a Verdani refugee, their four-fingered hands moving across a holographic display. The Verdani skin changed colors as they spoke, shifting through patterns that Hassan had learned meant agreement, concern, or sudden inspiration. They had been working together for 72 hours straight. Chinmi descended to the lab floor. The smell of burned circuitry and ozone filled her lungs. Her tablet chimed with another update. Mars colony reporting water purification issues. Luna calling for emergency supplies. The list never stopped growing. Ambassador Secretary General Adai appeared beside her, his lined face grave. We need to discuss evacuation again. If the prototype fails, it won't fail, Chinmi said. You can't know that. No, she Agreed, but they believe it won't. Look. At them, Edme followed her gaze across the lab. Dr. Amara was laughing again as the new containment field flickered too. Life stable and humming, Hassan and the Verdani engineer embraced their successful calibration glowing on the screen. In the corner, a team of students from Beijing University celebrated a breakthrough in mineral synthesis with exhausted cheers. There. Running on fumes, Addie said quietly, on. Hope that might be false. Hope is never false, Chinmi replied, only outcomes are, and we won't know the outcome unless we try. The second prototype held for 3 minutes before failing. The third lasted 20. By day 9 they had a working model that could sustain itself for 6 hours. It wasn't enough, Ta said. He needed something that would run for years, but they were learning. On day 11 something changed. Chinmi was reviewing supply requests when her office door burst open. Dr. Amara stood there, her eyes wild with sleeplessness, and something that looked dangerously like triumph. We have it, she said. Chinmi stood slowly. Have what? The recycler. It works, it's stable. We've been running it for 14 hours, and the reaction is actually improving. The Verdani refugees helped us understand the quantum harmonics we were missing. We don't need alien materials. We can make it from refined titanium and synthesize compounds we already produce. For a moment, Chinmi couldn't speak. Then you're certain? I've triple-checked everything. So has Hassan's team. So have the Corvani advisors. It works, Ambassador. We can manufacture it here and ship it to TD. Dr. Amara's voice cracked. We can save them. The factory lines roared to life within hours. Every manufacturing facility on Earth that could be retold was converted to producing components. The design was open-sourced across the entire planet. No patents, no corporate ownership, just humanity building together because lives depended on it. 3 days later, the cargo ship Perseverance launched from Kennedy Space Center, its hold filled with oxygen recyclers and repair equipment. Captain Maria Santos piloted it herself, pushing the engines beyond safe limits. Every hour mattered. Chinmi stood in mission control, watching the trajectory plot across the screen. 14 days to TD at maximum burn. The station had 12 days of oxygen remaining. It was going to be close. On day 16, Taui Station went silent. Their last transmission reported oxygen at 18%. Life support had failed in 3 of their 5 sectors. The crew was gathered in the remaining areas, rationing air, waiting. The world held its breath with them. Day 17, silence. Day 18, still nothing. On the morning of day 19, Chinmi was sleeping at her desk. When the alarms woke her, she jerked upright, her heart hammering, certain it was bad news. Every screen in the operations center was flashing. What happened? She demanded. The communications officer turned to her, tears streaming down his face. Ambassador, TD just came back online. The Perseverance arrived 6 hours ago. They're installing the recyclers now. Life support is climbing. They're going to make it. The room erupted. People were crying, hugging, laughing with relief. Chinmi felt her knees weaken. She sat down hard in her chair, her hands shaking. They had done it against probability, against time, against the galaxy's abandonment. Humanity had saved its own. But even as the celebrations continued around her, Chinmi's eyes went to the master display. TD was one colony 14 others still needed help. Proxima B's crop crisis, Europa's reactor, the Shanghai platform's air leaks. The victories would have to come one at a time. She stood, straightened her jacket, and moved to the next crisis. Briefing around her, the exhausted teams were already shifting focus, already adapting what they'd learned to the next problem. They were learning to stand alone and slowly, impossibly. They were learning to stand tall. Continue. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.